So before we get started, I want to better explain what and where Oglethorpe University is. So Oglethorpe University is a very, very tiny but really expensive liberal arts college in Brookhaven, Georgia. And in the podcast, I mentioned that Brookhaven is one of the wealthiest areas in inner city Atlanta. And I wasn't joking or exaggerating at all. Very, very wealthy people live there. And the university is normally quite expensive. However, they do offer a lot of scholarships, and they have a really high acceptance rate. So it's not terribly difficult to get in um, if you have good grades, which I had really good grades. Um, but there's a negative side to it being so small and so attached to its sort of like geographical location, the politics of Brookhaven as a whole, and that's everybody knows each other, and that's generational. So it isn't just the class you sort of go into. It's not like high school 2.0. Your reputation on the campus carries on for years even after you leave. When I became a student there, I was inundated with stories and reputations of people who had graduated like half a decade earlier. People still remember them, referred to them by name, and whatever reputation they had, usually a really negative one. The other problem is the Brookhaven connection part of it is that it it is kind of a school that most of the elite people who live in the suburban neighborhoods surrounding the school send their kids after high school. And that means that those reputations and all of that intertwine with the politics of Brookhaven. And Brookhaven incorporated itself as a city within a city specifically to isolate itself away from Fulton County, which is Atlanta proper, and to separate their schools from the public school system. It was very much a move to take the rich further away from the poor in contact with the poor. So people like me who come from Albany, Georgia, which is one of the poorest places in the country, are consummate outsiders. Um, and it was an entirely new world for me. Uh, it's also a culture of haves and being caught up in the moment and modern fashion and modern events. Um, a lot of the people who go there have diplomatic ties to other countries. A lot of people from foreign countries go there, and they tend to not be people from people. They are people from poor countries, but they tend to not be poor people from those countries. There's a set of luxury apartments that's just right next to the school, built on top of um, a luxury shopping area, and rent that's absurd for the area, like some of the most expensive places to live in Atlanta. That's not like in Midtown, but it's still really expensive. And like I lived at the Gables Apartments because I was taking care of two of the students, which I had mentioned in the podcast, and we had trash valet. Uh, you know, a valet trash service. You can take your trash can out and someone would dispose of it for you. And it was mandatory that you pay the little tiny fee that was part of it on top of the really, really expensive rent. Always thought that was really absurd. That's a very bougie thing um, to have, but that's sort of a normal feature. And most of the foreign exchange students that were there lived in those apartments. They didn't live in the dorms. Uh, and I mentioned this also in the podcast. It's crazy that we pay so much money for it, but the dorms are terrible. The worst quality dorms are as bad as some of the trailers I'd seen in Albany. Bad AC, outdoor facing AC, easy to break into. There were a couple of break-ins when I first got there. They were also covered up. Black mold giving people uh, long-term illnesses that were complained about and were hushed up and nothing was done. And because the people who run the school, of course, are on the board and know everybody who runs the city, there's no one to really go to enforce code um, to get any of this resolved. So students who have to live on campus in a really terrible environment. Um, it's actually quite sad. There are almost no security cameras either, which perplexes me. Not even in the student center, which is really fancy and ultra modern. There are domes for security cameras, but there's no DVR that I know of, and it's pretty much an open secret that none of that stuff works. Internet's constantly down. It's not properly secured. When I got there was no Wi-Fi password, and you could literally connect to it a mile away. Not the exaggeration, but actually connect to it a mile away. And you could see every device in the network. And it's not much better after I complained about it. I finally got them to incorporate a basic web key on an isolated non-guest version of it, and it's easy to break, and once you're in it, you can still see most of the devices connected to everything. It's really poor. I would not connect to it without a VPN anytime I was there, and most of the time I would just tether to my phone. It was more secure and more reliable, frankly. Getting assignments in on time was a nightmare because getting things submitted online didn't work, and a constant problem academically and with my Title IX fights with the university has been I have no idea when or if they receive any of my emails. And at least in Gmail, I would get a kickback, and it would tell me that there was a block. But the internal school email using Office 365 would not tell me, and I'm pretty sure there are assignments that professors have never received from me. I know for a fact an entire semester's worth was not received from me, and I had to literally duct tape all of my work to his office door. It was the only, and then I took a picture of it as proof that I had finally turned it in. And I'm not the only one who deals with those problems. But that's the kind of weirdness that Oglethorpe is, and the weirdness that Brookhaven is. Brookhaven is like a small town in a big city, full of people who have more money than sense, but they don't invest it in anything that's functional. And there was a great article I read, and I'll dig it up and link it in the description. That's a common problem with Ivy League universities around the country. It's because people who generally go there are of means. Anything that's not provided by the university, they'll just privately pay for. So if the food is making you sick, well, who cares? Because can't you just go and eat out every night? It's sort of the implication. And people who are there on scholarship and have to live in the dorms or are dependent, like I became, on the services at the university suffer. They don't get enough caloric intake. They eat food that makes them sick. They live in dorms that, makes them sick as well. And they don't have anywhere to go. Even though it's mandatory to stay in the dorms, most of the students who go there and are of means, they go home for the weekend or go home every night. They just have a dorm room and they don't use it, which is hilarious because as I got into student life, I learned that this was another open secret, is that people staying in the dorms are often not the students who were allocated those dorms. They police this a little bit, but people would swap dorms. People would come in and visit and never leave, because the dorms are so crappy. If you had the opportunity to get an apartment somewhere else, even though you were not technically allowed to, they would just not stay in their actual dorm room. But besides all of those problems, the academic part of the university is amazing, and that is something else I was not exaggerating about. Oglethorpe provides the best academic experience I've ever witnessed, and I've sat in classes at UGA, GSU, Emory, Kennesaw, Miami. I was in Tallahassee, went to around Florida State, a couple other places. Oglethorpe's classes are just amazing. It's like half old school, but some of the professors at least incorporate modern technology on them, and they're incredibly knowledgeable in their fields. And the small classroom size and the amount of time and effort the professors put into their classes and talking to students is amazing. Like, if you want to talk to a historian, you can spend hours in office hours and even beyond connecting with a professor and giving you books and connecting you to his connections at Harvard and Yale and Oxford and Cambridge. It's incredibly difficult in today's job market to get into academia. A lot of people will tell you it's a dead end. sort of field, but Oglethorpe is one of the few places that if you do all the extracurriculars, really connect with your professors, do really well, make good grades, and put a lot of effort into it, you can have a future as a professor, as a professional academic, as a museum curator. And that's a very, very rare opportunity. And that's why I was there. I was there for that. And that's been robbed from me. I don't really have hope that I can ever get that back now, even if I did win, which is sad because this is what I've always wanted to do my entire life. Um, I grew up in Albany, dirt poor, and I actually have a pull yourself up from your bootstraps kind of story because I took the computer skills I taught myself when I was a child and I worked my way up to owning my own IT firm. But I lost all that money taking care of my mother and medical expenses and generally living life. So I don't really have a lot to show for it except for the experience of it. But I escaped and came to Atlanta, and I didn't want to do all of that. I actually hate doing IT work, and I'm sure there's a lot of my friends when I post this on Facebook who know me as the IT guy. They remember seeing my ads on WALB and Fox 31.
Neovox Computers in Largo Plaza on Dawson Road is your local source for computer sales and service. The certified technicians at Neovox Computers have a combined 25 years experience in desktop and laptop repair, home and business networking, and business IT solutions. Frustrated with your virus-infected computer? The professionals at Neovox can clean up your infected system fast and within your budget. When you have a computer repair need, call 337-2238. Neovox Computers. Welcome to the 21st century.
And I'm the Neovox guy. That was the name of my company. I'm the computer dude, and that's kind of what I'm known for. I'm known as being this IT hacker guy. I have a confession to make. I hated every second of it. I like working with technology when it's my own projects, but I like using technology to learn other things. Like, as an example, as a project I did, I made the Parthenon in Minecraft for a project. I've always wanted to sort of use technology in a history preservation, teaching, sort of situation. I use technology to learn beyond the scope of the narrow world that Albany is, and escape the ignorance that sort of like holds in its grip. I certainly didn't pay for most of really kind of any of the books I read. But that's where I prefer to use my skills. I guess I'm a thief of knowledge, but a pirate in that sort of way. But instead of pirating pornography, I pirated books, textbooks, history books, that sort of thing, because I usually couldn't afford it. And I had a physical library of books, and that may be the most symbolic thing of all of this is, so I went to Oglethorpe to change my life and do the thing that I loved, and what I really loved was academia. What I really loved was learning and history and language and culture, and I did amass a physical library of books that was moderately large, and I had kept them with me through many, many moves. And the one thing that I lost that I wish I can get back out of losing almost all of my property is I lost my library of books almost down to the last book. And I went to Oglethorpe to expand that library of knowledge, and instead, and in some ways, it was taken away from me. The priority of the people who run the university is not knowledge or enlightenment. It's perpetuating privilege.